Welcome back, friends and foes alike, to the FantasyNow Dynasty Football podcast. This is Will Ryan, the Fantasy Philosopher, back again to talk Dynasty Football. We finally got another piece of the puzzle, with enough substance to move player rankings with the NFL Combine. Today, I'll review some recent transactions ahead of free agency, then we'll take stock of the tight end profiles. Remember, you can find even more content from the FantasyNow Plus team on our website at FantasyNowPlus.com. And you can find us across social media, including Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube. There have already been a few noteworthy fantasy transactions in anticipation of free agency. First, Deebo Samuel has been traded from the San Francisco 49ers to the Washington Commanders in exchange for a 5th-round pick. While this is seemingly a big impact for the remaining San Francisco wide receivers, Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, however, this move was expected, so you probably should have already targeted these players before the price jump with news of the trade. The positive news for Deebo is that he's better against zone than man, and with Jaden Daniels, the Commanders will likely see a high rate of zone coverage, trying to limit Daniels' rushing. Unfortunately for Deebo, his 2024 took a big step back against zone coverage, dropping from 0.25 targets per route run and 2.87 yards per route run in 2023, down to 0.20 targets per route run and only 1.77 yards per route run in 2024. Given that San Francisco accepted a 5th for him, I'm inclined to believe that he may just be the 2024 version of himself moving forward, where he's really just a bigger name than he is a fantasy contributor. Another transaction we saw included the Bengals putting the franchise tag on T. Higgins. This means Burrow will get to keep his top 2 targets, the dynamic duo of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The values of all 3 players should remain consistent from where they have been, and all are strong fantasy options. The Philadelphia Eagles gave Saquon Barkley a 2-year extension. He's now tied to the Eagles for the next 4 years, and is the first running back to make more than $20 million per year. While this signals the Eagles' intent to continue featuring Saquon, I still view the superstar running back as a sell in Dynasty. It is just so unlikely that he'll be able to replicate the success he had in 2024, which, that's why he nearly broke Dickerson's regular season rushing record. So many things have to go right. He'll need to stay healthy. The Eagles need to remain that run heavy. Remember, they were leading in the second half in almost every game and just pounding the rock to kill the clock. And Saquon has to maintain his efficiency throughout the season. That's a lot of assumptions to make, hoping to get that type of return on value. The other thing to consider with Saquon is how much value his name will get you right now. Here are some actual trades involving Saquon Barkley in fantasy football. First, we saw Saquon Barkley for the 107 and a 2026 first. It's pretty rare to get 2 firsts for a running back, and granted, Saquon Barkley just put up one heck of a season. So yes, you're trading away some very, very strong production, but this class has plenty of good running back options that should be available at the 107 to help replace Saquon's production. Granted, not at that level, but then you also add a 1st-round pick on top of it in future years. If you're a rebuilder, 100% give me the firsts. I also saw a trade with Saquon Barkley and Courtland Sutton versus Ladd McConkey and the 107. Let that sink in for a second. I would not pay the 107 for Cortland Sutton, which means in this trade, Saquon Barkley is getting you Ladd McConkey plus. Unless you are already set at running back and in contention to run back another championship, now's the time to sell Saquon at that price. Anytime you can get an up-and-coming star receiver for an aging running back, you try to make that trade. And in this case, Saquon Barkley for Ladd McConkey plus, that first-round pick can get you a replacement to put into the starting lineup for Saquon Barkley. Finally, I saw one that was Saquon Barkley for Kenneth Walker III and the 103. Again, I realize Kenneth Walker is not going to fully replace Saquon's production, but you do still get a starting running back that you can plug into your lineup, in addition to an early first-round pick. Those first-round picks are where you build your squad for the future. Even if you look at this class and don't like the options available to you at the 103, draft picks don't lose value. You can always trade it back to a future first. And I'd also encourage you to think about, what would Saquon Barkley's value be if he were to be injured and miss a season? He's already 28 years old, so he'd be coming back from a major injury at 29. Granted, we know he's a unicorn. We know he's a great athlete and an absolute stud fantasy football producer. But a 29-year-old running back with the kind of tread on his tires, I just don't think you can see the upside that his price will demand right now. I've also been tracking a trio of quarterbacks with Matthew Stafford, Sam Darnold, and Aaron Rodgers. It was recently confirmed that Stafford is staying with the Rams. In a fluid situation where it appears his future will be reviewed each year moving forward during the twilight of his career, this is great news for Puka Nacua. Puka already achieved a 19% target share in 2024, playing in only 11 games. So that figure is sure to go up as long as he can stay healthy. That doesn't even take into account the fact that the Rams are trying to trade Cooper Kupp. Whether or not Kupp does get dealt, Puka Nacua is the top receiver in that offense. Cooper Kupp is 31 years old, and frankly, I expect to see a trade similar to what we saw with Deebo Samuel. Sam Darnold's situation isn't resolved yet. He didn't get franchise tagged, so he is set to hit free agency. But we've heard that the Vikings are trying to keep him on the roster. It's to be determined in what capacity that would be, and this is a situation worth monitoring, both for Darnold's value, as a move to a good or bad offense will impact his value, and J.J. McCarthy's opportunity could be delayed if Darnold stays in Minnesota. While this has next to no effect on the skill players in Minnesota, as I expect either Darnold continues to start there, or J.J. McCarthy beats him out, and there's no drop-off in QB play. But what I do think about this situation is that it's a huge buy opportunity for both Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. Right now, with the indecision from the Minnesota Vikings, fantasy managers will be worried about whether or not Darnold is going to have a starting position. And similarly, for J.J. McCarthy, if Darnold does get re-signed by the Vikings. However, in today's NFL, Darnold is going to be starting somewhere in 2025. He has no reason to sign a backup contract in Minnesota. So either he will be starting in Minnesota, or in free agency, he will find another starting gig. The Vikings spent a first-round pick on J.J. McCarthy, and I find it hard to believe that they're going to spend the first 2 years of his rookie contract with him sitting on the bench. He had an entire year to learn the system while he was recovering from injury, and he should be ready to go in 2025. Finally, it looks like Rodgers' time in New York has come to an end. We think? Paging the New York Giants? There have been several rumored connections, including the New York Giants and the Las Vegas Raiders. Rodgers is hard to predict, so I'll just wait to see where he lands, but I don't expect to give a big upgrade to players wherever he lands, as he's shown to be a shell of his former self in recent years. Staying on topic with the Jets, they did release veteran wide receiver Davante Adams. The immediate impact is that Garrett Wilson becomes the alpha pass catcher with no significant threat to targets. This is the same situation that he was going into at the beginning of last year, only to find that Rodgers decided to bring in Davante Adams, and they split targets. This also bodes well for Breece Hall, as now the Jets will likely lean into the run game and have extra targets to distribute in the passing game, where Hall has proven to excel out of the backfield. Davante Adams may be worth a price check too. Aging receivers are frequently undervalued, and Adams can still put together a few solid seasons if he lands in the right spot, which, as an unrestricted free agent, he'll have significant control over. Now, let's move along and talk about the NFL Combine and how it impacted our rookie tight end prospects. First, let me remind you about my TE1 Prospect Profile. While draft capital is still a huge factor, prospects really need to be drafted in the first 3 rounds or so, there were still a lot of data points that impact their profile from the Combine. You've got speed score, where we're looking for a mark of 102 or more. And as a reminder to any new listeners, speed score is a metric that takes weight and 40 time into consideration to help standardize their score to identify how fast players are given their size. They also do the broad jump, where we look for 117 inches or more. They do a couple agility drills with the 3-cone and the shuttle. The 3-cone we're looking for under 7.15 seconds, and we want to see a shuttle under or at about 4.3. And then finally, when you put all of that together, there's a metric called the relative athletic score, which helps give a holistic view of a prospect's athletic profile, scoring them out of 10. For the relative athletic score, we really want to see our prospects hit a level of 8 or higher. Now, currently there are 6 tight ends projected to be drafted in the first 3 rounds. Those are Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, Harold Fannin Jr., Elijah Arroyo, Mason Taylor, and Gunnar Helm. Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, and Mason Taylor didn't participate. So if they can maintain their projected draft capital, they will fit our profile automatically. The same goes for Elijah Arroyo, who only participated in the bench press at the Combine. Harold Fannin is a very productive player out of Bowling Green. He actually led the NCAA in receiving yards. And no, not just for tight end. He led the entire NCAA, including receivers. His Combine performance was pretty disappointing, though. His speed score was only 97.94. And remember, we're really looking to hit a mark of 102. His broad jump was 118, where we only needed 117, so he's good there. His 3-cone came in at a pretty good 6.97, which is well under our 7.15 benchmark, and his shuttle clocked in at 4.39. So we really would like to see him have shaved a little bit off of that and gotten under 4.3, but it's not terrible. Overall, his relative athletic score ended up being 7.57, which is just shy of the 8 that we're looking for. Really, it was a mixed bag against my benchmarks, but with his production profile as strong as it is, he exceeded 3 yards per route run and over 4 receptions per game, both of those over his entire career, not just during his peak season. So I'm going to closely watch any testing that can come out of his pro day, and I'm going to look for any improvement at all to his speed score or short shuttle, but honestly, I'm probably keeping him on my board regardless. Next, we can take a look at Gunnar Helm. He's a really interesting case this year. The tight end from Texas improved his draft stock throughout 2024, to the point that he's now in the top 3 rounds. But then, at the Combine, he tested very, very poorly. It was bad enough that my initial reaction, while seeing his results, was that he was going to be nearly undraftable for fantasy. That is, until he revealed that he sprained his ankle during the first attempt at the 40, which actually was a false start and didn't even count. So I can kind of overlook a lot of his Combine numbers and just put extra emphasis on his pro day results. But he did work all the way through the combine, so we do have some metrics to look at. His speed score was a disappointing 87.83, but obviously he had just sprained his ankle, so he was still acclimating to that. He wasn't able to participate in the broad jump, but his 3-cone was actually 7.15 seconds, which hits our benchmark. The short shuttle, 4.4, targeting a 4.3, which on a sprained ankle isn't bad. And obviously his RAS came in pretty low, down at 4.49. The bright spot here is he was able to hit one of the agility benchmarks, even with his sprained ankle. So I like his odds of improving at his pro day. But the speed score is way off the mark, so I'm hoping that he really was impacted by that ankle injury, and we'll see a much better score coming out of his pro day. There were 2 other prospects that really stood out positively with their performance and have gotten my attention, despite not being projected for adequate draft capital. First, we can talk about Thomas Fedone. Out of Nebraska, his testing met both the agility benchmarks, posting a 7.01 3-cone score and a 4.29 second shuttle. He crushed the broad jump, jumping 10 feet 6 inches, or 126, when we only need 117 inches. He barely missed the speed score, posting a 99.6 when we wanted a 102. And his RAS was a very solid 8.98. This puts him very close to meeting my entire tight end 1 profile, although I would like to have seen him be a bit more productive in college, given that in his best season, he only averaged 1.3 yards per route run. The other player who really caught my eye is Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech. With his testing, he easily met both agility benchmarks, posting a 6.94 3-cone and a 4.27 second shuttle. His 121-inch broad jump easily clears the 117, and he hit the speed score that was needed by posting a 103.01. His RAS was over 9, and really, the only thing missing from his profile is his draft stock. He's not currently projected to be drafted in the first 3 rounds, but he does have a very solid production profile, proving his receiving upside. He was above 2.24 receptions per game over his entire career, which typically I look for about 2 receptions per game. His best season had a yards per route run of 2.13, which easily clears the 1.5 plus benchmark I tend to look for, and his career average yards per route run was 1.72, which is greater than the 1 yard per route run I look for, understanding that in their early years, tight ends don't tend to produce very much. He is definitely worth late round consideration in your rookie drafts, and you definitely won't have to spend anything more than a 3rd round pick on him, and more likely a 4th or 5th. I'm also taking a closer look at CJ Dupree and Terrence Ferguson. They both cleared the speed benchmark, but didn't participate in the agility testing. They also both have solid production profiles in college. They exceeded both the 1.5 yards per route run during their best season and career 1 yard per route run marks. They both posted a relative athletic score above 9, so they should definitely be on the radar as pro days are conducted over the next month. The other combine participants really didn't put up impressive enough testing numbers to merit further discussion. Jake Brenningstool, Maliki Matavao, and Bryson Nesbitt all earned below 8 for their relative athletic score. Pro days could always shift things a little bit here or there, but I think at this point, I've got a pretty good idea of how I'm restricting down the tight ends that I'm going to be considering anywhere near their rookie ADPs, and my tight end rankings now look something like this. First, no surprise, I've got Tyler Warren. Second, I've got Mason Taylor out of LSU. He just seems like the type of prospect that can't miss. Harold Fannin might have more upside than those two, but coming from a smaller school, you always have to wonder a little bit about the competition they faced, so I've got him at number 3. Colston Loveland out of Michigan is number 4, and after that, my confidence level starts to drop a bit, as the players really didn't seem to hit the entire tight end 1 profile. I've got Terrence Ferguson 5th and Jalen Conyers 6th, but I'll keep an eye on those because I think the testing numbers at Pro Day might be able to flip those a little bit. Thomas Fidone at 7th, and currently Gunnar Helm down at 8th, but he does have a good chance to move up, as long as he can put up reasonable Pro Day testing and show that his ankle injury really impacted his combine testing. We'll wrap it there with the show today, but remember, you can find all of my content and more at FantasyNowPlus.com. There's a whole lot of content coming out with free agency starting up, as players are traded, released, and free agents start to sign. So be sure to follow us on socials. We've got a presence on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Basically, hit us up anywhere you can. With that, I'm out.